Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Land Development Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Glick. And if this is your first time joining us, each week when you tune in, you'll hear a couple different types of shows. Sometimes when you tune in, you're going to hear industry news. That's where we pull up a few different headlines. We talk about how those headlines and the things that are going on in them are impacting the industry. Other times when you tune in, we have on individuals associated with the industry and we do an interview style show. And that's what we have for you today. And so I'm excited to have with me Alex Kamkar, who is the managing shareholder at Bold Fox Development. Alex, thanks for joining me.
Hey, thank you for having me, Ryan. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had some good conversations leading up to this, and so I know we've got some good topics we're going to dig into here today. But before jumping into some of the more in-depth things, I would like to rewind back a little bit and look
Sure.
at your background as far as how you got into the industry. Kind of maybe can you take us through going back to your
Yeah,
time at A&M and then work up to where you're at today?
absolutely. So, I'm Alex Kamkar, managing shareholder, Bold Fox Development. When I got started in the industry, I grew up in Texas. Went to Texas A&M University for my undergraduate. I was in the Corps of Cadets. I have an ag major. I can tell you about a lot of cuts of meat, really, really well at the butcher counter, but didn't have that real estate, bug. And then, I was a failed lawyer. I tried for the LSATs and did terrible, and then decided I needed more education and wanted to do something around business. My mom said, "Well, what do you always liked real estate and you want to help people?" And I thought about that a lot and went and got my master's in real estate from the University of North Texas. And at this time, it was probably '08, '09, which was not the best time to come out of the market. And so I started off as an analyst for a multifamily group, and then was out for about 2 years out in California, and then came back in 2012. Started working for a smaller developer here in the Houston area, and after about 4 or 5 years, jumped over to Toll Brothers. Worked at a big public company, America's finest homes being built there, and it was a tremendous opportunity. We were now in that zone right around 2014, 2015, 2016. So we're past the Great Recession. Home builders are starting to crank back up. And Toll Brothers had started up a master plan community division here in the Houston area. And they had bought, roughly speaking, about almost 4,500, 5,000 acres worth of dirt. And I was the first guy that was hired by Jim Jenkins that was an accountant. And so Jim, for those who are in the know, Jim Jenkins helped start Newland Communities, the one that was recently bought. But when he started, they did Cinco Ranch, which is in the Houston area, a big master plan, probably was a top 10 at one point back in the day. And Toll Brothers brought him in to help with these master plan community type projects. And great opportunity there. Worked under him for about 4 or 5 years and then struck out on my own at the end of 2019, about 5 months before COVID. Um, Weird enough.
Perfect timing. Yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah. So I'm interested in from a schooling standpoint. So when I have conversations with people, it's really a pretty big mix, and I would say the majority of
sure,
people didn't go to school for anything real estate related.
absolutely.
But you having gone back to school to get your master's, but actually being able to emphasize, on the real estate side, what was that process like? Did you feel like
You
it was
know,
worth the effort that you put into it?
I'm Ryan. I'm in a weird place with higher education. I think it's become more unattainable for so many people. As students are starting to learn that debt is not dischargeable in a bankruptcy,
Hmm.
and so like when you're thinking about law school and $200,000 dollars in law debt is not great, or in a master's program, a 5-digit number, it's a lot. So when I went to A&M, I believe that was a tremendous foundation, but real estate, in my mind, is very much an apprentice kind of role. It's master apprentice, master apprentice. Usually, there's somebody who's shepherding you in real estate, whether you're a realtor working with a broker or if you're a remodeler. Not everybody knows how to remodel a home right away. They learn from somebody else doing it. And so for me, working with Jim, I learned so much more in 3 years working with Jim Jenkins and the Toll Brothers team than I did in my master's in real estate. Now, my master's in real estate was important because, it starts developing the discussions around the financials of real estate. And I think that those are really important. But I never learned at my master's program how to go release a deed of trust.
Right.
I learned that in my first job. Nobody came and showed me, here's how you negotiate with the bank all your loan documents that are this thick. And so, what I always tell people, go pull out your phone, call the five most important people or the people with the biggest stroke that you know in that phone, and go take them to lunch on your nickel. And those people will usually open doors, try to help you succeed. Those guys are just as helpful as a professor telling you to do ABCD for 2 years. But you have to go find the program that works for you. There's a great program at Texas A&M with a veteran real estate professor, Tim Early, who's teaching guys how to read plats, how to read construction plans, how to go value this. And then there's somebody who's talking to you about IRR. You know what I mean? And you have to figure out what is your role in that.
Right.
So that's kind of my philosophy. I think there's a reckoning in higher education, generally speaking. You want to go to a program that is going to help you get a placement after you get out,
Yep.
not I'm going to take your money and here's the letterhead, because that's what a lot of programs are in different disciplines across, I think, higher ed.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up the kind of both sides of it, right? So the on the job and the mentoring side of things, and
Absolutely.
how you went through that, because I do think there's it tends to be, from at least the conversations I've had, it tends to be more of an on the job type of
Oh,
experience
absolutely.
industry. So anyway, I was going to ask you about that. So I'm glad you dug into the mentors that you had kind of leading to where you're
Sure.
at now. Now, when you branched out onto your own, I'm curious, what was the deciding factor there? Like, why did you decide that, hey, I want to go start my own company and
Yeah.
grow this?
No, I think there's a couple of things. First of all, our industry in real estate is really fragmented. It's very localized. You always hear real estate's local, Maine and Maine. You hear these verbs. There are very few national actors. And so for me, it's kind of, there's an opportunity. The gray tsunami that you keep hearing about every now and then in the news of a lot of baby boomers are leaving. That's happening in my industry. It's happening in industries all across the economy. And so for us, I think there was a real opportunity. I also know I'm never going to be rich making somebody else making somebody else's business work. And so I think it's a little bit of being able to kind of swing the bat and the mentality. And that's not for everybody. Some people are very, very happy with stability and a stable paycheck. And then some people say, I want to say I swung one time. And so that kind of was the impetus for me. And also it goes back to the mentoring decision, and the discussion is I also had a really, really strong network of people that were really invested in my success, who I'd gotten to meet, I'd gotten to learn from, talk to, who we had done business at my previous stops. And so you also had a group of people who are willing to kind of catch you and pick you up. And I think for anybody listening, if you're in real estate, you have to know what your network is. There's always a stupid phrase, but it's real. You can either work the net or you can make your net work you. It's up to you. You have to figure out, are you working the net or is the net working you? Um, those people usually want to help you. If you've done business with them and it's been a good experience, they will help. And so that made the transition from, call it a corporate job to self-employment a lot easier.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your company now. And so, for those listening in who, may be from outside of the Houston area or outside of Texas, who may not be familiar with it, can you kind of give the explanation of what you do as a company?
Sure, absolutely. Well, we are a master plan community developer here in the Southeast Texas, greater Houston area right now. Our goal is to be one of the best developers in our region. If we're one of the best developers in our region doing, master plan communities, we're by default one of the best in Texas. And so for us, we've got 5 communities that we've actively done work in. And so for us, what we try to do is put together the capital stack. What is the raise? Put the deal together, find the dirt, figure out the entitlements, and then bring the partnership together. And then we will be a contractor to that single asset entity or that partner. We've got several projects, one 470 acres, one 200 acres, one as small as 20 acres. And so what we want to do is bring the builders who kind of want to be in that area, who believe in that submarket, and then go and find the best piece of dirt in that area, get it entitled to get it ready to go. And we try to make it as easy for our partners of, we talk once a month, sometimes weekly, sometimes daily. Here's what's going on in the project. So that way builders can go and do what they do best, which is home building, and developers can go deal with the entitlement process. We've also got some equity partners in some of these deals that they just want to place capital as an LP, and that's great too. And so for us, it's we're working with groups who want to continue to be in the Texas plex, so to speak, the area between Fort Worth, Dallas, down to San Antonio, Austin, and down to the Houston area, and who want to compete in that area. And so that's kind of been our focus right now.
Okay, nice. And you mentioned a few different projects there. So something I also like to ask on the show as well is, when you think back of some of the projects that you've been involved with over the years, whether it's projects that you've done at Bold Fox or it's projects that you did previously, is there anything that stands out in your mind as one that maybe was the most memorable, the most
Sure.
challenging, something to that effect?
Yeah, no, there's a couple. So for anybody who's been following, the national markets and real estate, Hurricane Harvey in 2017 is a gigantic changing event. There was a gigantic governmental overreaction on floodplain standards. You had deals mid-flow that were completely evolving in terms of governmental regulation. So we did Woodson's Reserve, which is in the Spring area. So if you think of Houston, think going towards the north. That was a probably, I don't know, north of $100 million development in terms of total construction cost. Um, Toll Brothers has not normally gone and done the most, I'm going to call it modern design techniques in the sense of architecture wise. And we did some very modern looking amenities. We had a $5.5 million rec facility that I think absolutely set the tone for amenities in our market. We compete with guys like Howard Hughes and the Woodlands, and then their new community, the Woodlands Hills. I think they were reacting to our facility, and I think they've been and built a $9 million a rec facility, and so that was really really special because we got to that dirt more or less the first hole being dug to having two or three school sites on there, having some partners come in later on, and we really every piece of dirt in that area was really considered. And that was a beautiful project I enjoyed working on. Sienna, which is in Fort Bend County down to our south, got to work with Johnson Development and our toll team. 3,400 acres of development. We were putting in modern amenities that weren't really in that area before. Being able to influence schools and where they're going, as well as driving, value. We probably had 10 different lot products from 100-foot lots all the way down to townhome. And so that was a really, really fun project to work on. And then what we're doing in Atwater today, we're on the northwest corner of the region, going into the prairie area. And so the Atwater is the Atwater Prairie Chicken. And so we're trying to use themes around that, and trying to go back to, I don't want to say the lands because that's so corny, but I think it's simpler amenities. I don't think it needs to have a hotel in the community. I think it's trails, it's path, it's having the piece of dirt speak to you. I think this phone, for better or for worse, people want to disconnect from that. And so when you drive into that community, we want you to feel like you're in a park-like place, a prairie, a nature place that naturally calms us down due to millions of years of physiology, as opposed to seeing sticks up everywhere and homes up everywhere and somewhere else. We want them to feel like they're coming into a park setting. So that's been really,
Yeah.
really awesome to help bring that to life.
No, that's cool. That's a interesting perspective on it. What's been the reaction so far as you've been going through that new development, kind of
You
taking that
know,
approach of almost like disconnecting a little bit?
yeah, it's we're just starting out. We're delivering our first lots coming up, but what I would tell you is the reaction from our team on the landscape architecture side. I think there's like a breath of fresh air because I
Yeah.
think they're not being asked to go and do the next. Well, did you see that?
Hmm.
I think they're being asked to leave good enough alone, restore what was there. And so in that way, I can feel that they're excited about it. Our builders have really glommed onto that in a positive sense of, um, it's not going to be an internal competition of who can go make the gaudiest thing. It's going to be who can make something that is restorative to people. And we've got a good list of people who've already looked at our interest list. And so I just think it's going to continue to accelerate. And I do think, especially post COVID, you heard people talk about, I just want to be outside.
Yeah.
The amenities were changing before our eyes of, I would like a deconstructed gravel path along a right of way that has water. as opposed to this big playset. You know what I
Right.
mean, kind of thing. And I
Yep.
think it's really changing, and taste is changing. So,
Nice, nice. No, that's really cool. And so, whether it's this project or other projects, when you kind of think about where the industry is right now, what do you think the biggest challenges right now
uh,
facing land developers or real estate in
um,
general?
I think we are at a inflection point in the country. I'll go back to where we were when I first got in the industry. If you ever heard a political leader or anybody talk about housing, it was an afterthought in terms of policy. And this is still coming after the Great Recession when we had this. But when I first started, there was never a discussion in a policy speech about housing ever. And now, with this election season coming up here, we're doing this in September, a few months before the 24 election. You are now hearing candidates on both sides talk about housing as one or two, and that is completely changing the dynamic. And some of this, Ryan, is this housing undersupply that we've had has not started today. It didn't start even 5 years ago. It comes out of the Great Recession in 2006, 7, and 8, of us probably underbuilding probably a million homes a year, and so I think the challenges now are affordability. I think you will start to see Jerome Powell and the Fed reduce finance costs, and that will come back down. But the cost of land have gone up. The cost of a board foot has gone up for 1,000 board feet. When I first bought my house, 2016, I think we bought 125 a square resale, from Pairing Homes, and now that number is 160 as a starting point, and that's an affordability gap that is really really widened. So I think that's a tremendous challenge. I think we're going to have to relook at the standards of what zoning is and what it's trying to achieve. Is it about safety, life, health issues, or is it about being exclusionary? I think there needs to be a really working on that, and the mentality that's going on there. I think we're going to have to figure out how to construct houses and do developments more economically. I mean, the average house in America is north of $400,000. I don't know anybody outside of very few that can go afford a $400,000 house with a 20%, or in this case, $80,000 cash down payment, just without help.
Yep.
And so, what we're going to do as a real estate industry and as a development industry is we're essentially going to build ourselves out of a job. We have issues of housing and shelter where there's not enough, and now we have what I'm going to call opportunistic groups coming in, where it's build for rent or others who are now trying to compete to provide shelter, but their inputs in that shelter directly compete with the inputs to build a house: wood, cement, trim, all those things. And you're now seeing discussions in the political realm about how do we limit corporate landlords. That's a real concern, and so I think we as an industry, home builders, developers, even the trades downwind of us, also need to look at what are the issues around personnel. You have a whole cohort in the baby boomers who are literally rolling out of industry who know how to do a lot of this. And now we're having to say, well, we need to put more supply on the ground with less people who know how to do that. We have less plumbers, less carpenters, less developers, less home builders than we had 30 years ago. Real issue.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you jumped into the build to rent, because that was going to be something I was going to ask you about. Is what's the
Sure.
place? What is the place for build to rent in our society, or helping with
Yeah.
this affordability issue?
I think build to rent is evolving. I'm not going to try to make too much news, but I'm going to say this: the groups who are telling us in the build to rent space that everybody just wants to lock and leave and not own anything are completely wrong. And you had the Wall Street Journal here on August 28th or 29th publish an article covering a survey where 9 out of 10, 8.9, 89% of people said they want and believe home ownership is part of the American dream. 89%. That's not a small number. And so I do think they have a space to fill. But do I think that they need to be the principal actors in our housing industry because we don't have enough home builders building homes or enough developers developing? I don't think so. I think they create a lot of systemic risk in these communities when they go have an approval for 200 built to rent homes. And if a bad landlord gets a hold of that, it could turn into a blighted area. It's a real issue. And, in a lot of these areas, Ryan, they're putting 200 or 300 homes on a single platted lot. How do you sell that off?
Yeah.
It's really hard. So I just think we as an industry, in working with these groups who are doing build to rent, and make no mistake, there's home builders who are working for build to rent investors. I think we have to have a discussion as an industry, as a group of people, as Americans, and decide, um, do we want to promote housing, or do we want to promote shelter? Do we want to promote home ownership, or do we want to promote rentership? I mean, Ryan, the American dream in the middle class has been built by families owning their own homes, building up that equity. And what happens is, when BlackRock or some large private equity group now owns your home, it's a wealth transfer from an individual or a family to the balance sheet of BlackRock. Is that better, or do we want that balance sheet and that transfer of wealth to go to families and individuals?
Right.
We as an industry need to decide what would be good. And I would tell you, I think foundationally speaking, is probably home ownership for individuals and families, is my guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, I appreciate you speaking on that, because I think it's important to get perspectives on the build to rent, and just how we're going to tackle this as a, as an industry at large. And
Oh,
so I think, what you've brought up is super interesting. We've talked a little bit about it coming into this conversation. So um, it's going to be interesting to see how the build to rent goes. It doesn't seem like it's necessarily slowing down too much on the build to
yeah.
rent side, at least from what I see where I'm located.
Well, the irony is, and you hear it if you've been observing this for a while. Well, we're only 0.5% of the market now. Now we're 1%. Now we're 2%. And I think it's okay that they can be a single digit or even a double digit, depending. But here's the issue: these are all commodities. They're bidding up the price of the commodity, whether they are 1% or a 1/4% or something else. When you're bidding out a linear board foot of 1,000 board feet, and then you say, well, I need to do this times 300. Well, the guy is going to go and say, that is going, the forester is going to say, well, I'll give you a better price for the guy who's buying 300, builder packs versus a guy who's buying two. It's just, I mean,
Hmm.
it's economics. And I,
Yeah.
I think we have to figure out, what are we going to do on a tax policy? I really believe the best way to address this is through tax policy and incentives. We need to incentivize home builders and developers through tax policy to say, hey, go build that extra spec home. I think through tax policy with developers, I think if you can take out some of the tax liabilities with regards to going and putting in a 2 or 3 or 400, 500 acre development, I think you would see more people get to yes when it comes down to an investment decision. Mom and dad, very unfortunately, is about 8 major decisions downwind of housing. You know what I mean? You have to have a
Yeah.
governmental decision. You have to have a finance decision. You have to have a capital investment. I mean, on down the line. Mom, that steak that mom and dad is eating is from a cow that is in Iowa somewhere or Nebraska somewhere way far away, and they decide to go and make a steak hasn't come. It could be a steak, could be a hamburger, could be a lamb, it could be anything. But mom and dad still need to be able to access housing, and I just think we need to discuss, what do we want to produce, kind
Yep.
of thing.
Yeah. How do you think? So one of the things I know in your background as well, that you're on the city council for a number of years, and I'm just, a lot of the problems I hear at the municipality level is, a lot of times the council doesn't always see eye to eye
Agreed.
with real estate developers, and so you are in a unique situation where you actually have been on the city
Yeah,
council, and so you've actually sat there. And how do you
absolutely.
think that's helped you, better understand kind of the decisions
So
that are put in front of the council?
So I stood for election twice in the city of Pearland, just south of Houston. About 125,000 people got elected, and what I'm going to tell you is that there's all kinds of pressures. The first is, well, does this make good sense for our city? Do we need housing? And in many instances, the answer is yes. Okay, check that box. Well, then you got to go and say, well, is this going to create car traffic? Is this going to create infrastructure issues? Could be A, could be B, yes or no. And then the other part that a political figure or somebody who's in charge here has to go and say is the little old lady or little old guy who supported me in my last race, are they going to hate this or like this and call me up and complain about this issue? And many times that person holds more sway than DR Horton or Build to Rent Group or whoever, the developer, because I'm going to see you once or twice. I'm going to go every Saturday to or Friday night lights. I'm going to see that person. And they're going to remind me of how bad a decision that is. And so there's a lot of competitive interests. And so what I would tell you, going back to this, Ryan, is it goes back to what do we think is important for us to emphasize. What I think you're hearing at the national level and at some of these state levels is housing is a necessity. Now, that council member is going to hear from that little old lady or little old man or neighbor. And then the response I would say is, I think our kids or their grandkids, your grandkids, deserve to live close to grandma and grandpa. They shouldn't have to live 400 miles away because, they can't find adequate housing close by. Um, but I do think it's competitive. I think what builders, developers need to understand when they're coming to a governmental regulator is there is so much more pressure than just the dollars and cents and what's in front of them. There's other considerations. 360 view needs to be, not just the 90 degrees in front of me. And when you understand, I would always hear from somebody who wanted to build an apartment or development, and the neighbors would come and yell, and I would always go to that person coming before us and say, did you go talk to anybody? Did you notice anybody? Did you have any involvement with the community whatsoever? Because in my mind, and I'm just me, those people were here first before you came here. Are you going to be a good neighbor? Are you going to at least pick up the phone? I always used to joke around. I would say, are you a member of the Chamber of Commerce? It's a hell of a lot easier to say no to somebody who doesn't invest in our community, doesn't do anything. It's a hell of a lot harder to say, you know what, the Chamber of Commerce member here has a petition. It's a hell of a lot harder to go and reject them.
Yeah.
So whenever we go into a development area, we're a member of the Chamber of Commerce. We usually donate to the high school football team, and we usually are helping the kids who are doing rodeo or FFA or something like that. We want to be seen as a helper, beneficial actor, not the guy who's here to screw up my town and its traffic patterns.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's an interesting perspective. Do you think there's a problem with, from a city council standpoint, when you have individuals who are on there that don't necessarily have any background in business, but yet they're face to face with like business owners, where there is
Sure.
there's obviously a profit incentive when you're coming in to do a development project, and it's not always, I feel like, understood from some of the different municipalities, or they understand it, but they don't know the
Right.
details of it because they haven't necessarily run
So
a business like that.
here's what I would tell you. There is definitely an information imbalance between the developer and the builder on those areas of knowledge, and then what a city, let's call it council member, is going to see. A city council member or a county commissioner is going to see this maybe once a month for 12 months, so 12 times in a year, versus that developer, that engineer, that builder is going to deal with this every single day as part of their career. And so it's a very much an information imbalance. It's asymmetric. What a council member, county commissioner needs to understand is what are the drivers of making this deal. Like, let me give you an example. The city of Pearland, we had a bad development go bust. Guy just got way over his head. He had a development agreement pre-COVID, pre-Atlas 14, which is Hurricane Harvey, and he had about $25 million in commitments and for offsites. And his deal was just bad. As somebody who worked with pro formas, understood the math, the reason they're trying to renegotiate their agreement is because they don't have the money. I mean, period, point blank. And so they're trying to reduce their liabilities. And so I told these other council members who didn't have exposure, I said, this is a thing you do right before you go bankrupt or before the lender takes back the keys. And predictably, what happened is the next meeting, which was about a month later, the lender came and showed up and said, we need you to help us. And I just told him, I was like, these guys don't have the balance sheet to fix this. Um, as a council member, not every member is going to know that, but we had a very good council. We had an engineer at one time, we had an accountant, we had a business owner, we had a great city attorney. And so we had a little bit of expertise, but usually there's an imbalance. What I would always tell folks is when you have these land use kind of things, lean on your city staff, lean on your attorney, and understand when it can go the worst and what that looks like. Because when it goes great, nobody ever bothers you. It's when it goes bad. Oh, they're not performing. We don't have enough water. The traffic is terrible. Well, did they do a traffic study? what did the traffic study, you know what I mean? Like work through those issues, because when it goes bad, guess what? The developer, the engineer, builder doesn't go to your meetings. The community goes and you're there, you know?
Right.
So
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Let's shift gears just a little bit. So
sure,
last segment of the show we do is like a lightning round where I have 5 questions for you, just based on your career and everything like
sure.
that, and just interested in getting kind of a short 60-second snippet, clip from you. So first question for you: what's the first thing you do when you start a new project?
I think you think of what the vision is going to see and be. Pipes are what they are, roads are what they are. What a developer's special skill needs to be is I need to see what isn't there and make it happen. And that usually means I have to have a vision of what is the feeling I want the person who's driving through the community to feel. And so I think when I'm starting that, don't get me wrong, we have to do the pro forma, we got to do some other stuff that are very technical in nature. But the first is what could this be? And then start working backward. And then that'll help inform, well, how much money do you need to raise? How much amenities do you need to have? How, if I have a really, really great piece of dirt, I can do less. If I have a really mediocre piece of dirt, I have to do more.
Yeah,
So
like it. All right, next one. What's one thing you wish more non-developers understood about development?
everybody's a developer until the county commissioner or the city council tells you to pound sand. It's always easy. Oh, we'll just talk to them. What you have to realize is there's somebody who has to put a stamp or say yes or sign a document agreeing to your plan or your idea. And so it's not that easy. So I would just say if you want to be in land development, if you want to go do community projects, things like that, you have to be having a high degree of being able to be punched in the face and keep moving, keep adjusting, keep adapting, and improvising. My big deal at Water, we took 19 months to get it entitled, and that was because the city council thought we were going to go away, and we kind of didn't go away. And then they finally said, "Okay, we'll deal with you." So,
All right, next one. If you weren't a developer, what would you be?
ooh, I think probably a chef. I think taking care of people, whether it's feeding them, giving them housing, community to live in. I think we're here for a reason. I think taking care of each other is part of that.
Cool. All right, next one. What's the best career advice that you've received in your career so far?
Ooh, best career advice I think I receive is keep the main thing the main thing. Get good at your craft. Don't be fast. Um, you know, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. We try to get everything. We try to spit out the answer, and then it's wrong. You know what I mean? Be
Yeah.
more considerate.
Yep.
You know,
All right, last one here. What would you say is the most challenging part of your job today?
I think the challenging part is it's a hub and a spoke. There's a lot of different consultants that need our input. It's a lot of different investors who are tying into you, builders, clients. It's trying to make sure to keep all that in front of you, manage the time, manage those interactions. Because, I can have a situation with an engineer that he needs a 1 minute answer. If I don't give him that 1 minute answer, I can delay myself days and he will just wait to hear that 1 minute answer. And so you just have to keep everything in front of you. The reality is land development is knowing a little bit about a lot. You know what I mean? Here, and here. And so that's the most difficult thing. Once you get the hang of it, once you have a successful development or two, I think it slows down. But the first one or two, you're constantly interacting and giving feedback. So
Nice. All right. Well, what does 2024, 2025, 2026 look like for you?
we are super excited. We're real close to delivering our 600th or 700th lot. I want to say it's like 700th.
Wow.
2025, we are going to continue to build in those projects at Water, La Seguera. We're finishing out another project, Venetian Pines. But we're actively growing. Our team is about 3 or 4 people. We're bringing on more headcount. We're looking for a lot more deal flow. I think you're going to see a lot of interest rate relief here in the next probably 12, 15 months. which I think will make it easier for us to sell homes. So we're pretty excited, and people continue to stream into Texas. We're about 1,400 people a day moving from all over the country into Texas, and Houston's getting a big share of that. And so we have to find places for those folks to live.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing seeing that migration happen. Um,
Absolutely.
so I guess with that said, what's the best way for people listening in to connect with you and to learn more about
Sure.
Bold Fox?
We're on the World Wide Web. Bold Fox Development, BOLDFOX Development spelled out.com. If you want to reach out to me, you can reach out at admin at boldfoxdevelopment.com. That's the best way to reach out. We're making a lot of new relationships. We're growing. We'd love to hear from folks, and we'd love to hear feedback on the podcast for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah, so as always, those of you listening in, all of these details will be on the show notes page. So if you look down in the description, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're on one of the podcasting platforms, down in the description, you'll see a link to the show notes page where you can get that contact information and the website link and everything there. Alex, this was awesome. I really appreciated you. Really appreciate you hopping on and kind of talking through all these details and everything. And any last parting words before we call it a show?
for the folks who are home builders or developers who help us along the way, we are the most necessary thing in a long time for so many people to live their American dream. It is a privilege to be able to help that, be a part of that. And so just continue to do it. We need more houses than we know what to do with. Um, it's a real honor to do this job. And I would encourage folks who are thinking about getting into it, go full bore. We need you. And it's exciting to see. I used to be the young guy in the industry, and now I'm not anymore. I've lost my hair. But it's exciting to see a bunch of young cats come into the industry. But we need more folks to go in and make this American dream continue.
Love it. Love it. All right, guys, you listening in, make sure you click that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed, and we will talk to you next week.
All right. Thanks,
Thank
Ryan.
you.
Appreciate it.